I'm invincible. I'm paying money. The girl's happy. She's got no money. I got my rocks off. Oh, how good is this?
Welcome to Bound for Glory on SYN 90.7 FM, talking all things footy, the only footy show on SYN. I'll review all the games from Friday and last night. We'll look at all the games that are coming up today, and we'll talk about the ASADA investigation, the AFL investigation into Essendon, which is ongoing and, you know, keeps providing us with a lot of new info. It's obviously the biggest story of the season, so we'll cover that in depth. First, we'll introduce the panel. My name's Ethan.
My name's Ben.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Peter.
And I'm Damon.
Yeah, it was a strange thing to watch last night. Credit to the Essendon Football Club, the players who, in difficult circumstances, it was very bittersweet to see, especially at the end, everyone joined in for the club song. Yeah, it's very difficult what to make of it. It's one of those moments that's, you know, been thrown up in footy a couple of times this year, that they're sort of trapped in this bittersweet moment, and especially they're playing for their coach, and obviously he's got some things to answer for, and, you know, it's a difficult moment for the Essendon Football Club. But last night, they did it, they did it for James Hird, and it's a very conflicted situation for everyone involved. And they got over the line. Zaharakis again sinking Mick Malthouse.
It was fantastic in that last quarter.
As much as we can say, you know, it was great for the game, it was a great spectacle. Yeah, well done Essendon, you know, for being so fantastic and like going over the drugs and all that stuff. It was actually just a terrible game of football.
Yeah, it was
absolutely terrible. I was there as a neutral. I somehow managed to get my hands on tickets, and it was absolutely disgraceful. It was really bad.
Yeah, at moments within watching the game, you sort of looked at it and goes, well, you know, one of these two sides will be falling into eighth, and it doesn't look as if they'll be putting up a fight. The ball use was horrendous by both sides for 3 odd quarters until Essendon sort of picked themselves up and had that go. They ran, they broke lines, and Carlton, is it fitness? Is it mental? They appeared to just fall away. I'm just not sure what it is.
I think it's their mental toughness, I guess. I found that they weren't running hard enough. They weren't putting enough pressure on. I just think they're mentally weak, and I reckon in the off season they need to get a tackling coach, because it just wasn't good enough. They weren't putting enough pressure on at all at stoppages, and I mean it was really congested in the last quarter as well. I found both sides were pushing their players down the field to really congest it, and even then Essendon players were just running through the wall of Carlton players, and wasn't good enough.
Well, they ended up being their own worst enemy in the end, because McInnes knocked, who was it, Simpson out in the forward pocket, and that led to Zaharakis' goal. So it's kind of a microcosm of the entire night. They ended up being their own worst enemy.
Well, they're still trying to find their feet under Mick Malthouse, aren't they, really?
Well, how long do you give them, though?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it really shouldn't take them 22 weeks for them to really establish themselves under Mick Malthouse. I mean, they're not a bad list. I mean, it's a list that's taken them to the finals previously. It shouldn't be dropping games, you know, in fourth quarters and all that. I mean, they're almost level with North Melbourne, you know, in terms of, you know, losing games or giving up leads. So
nobody is as good at that as North are.
Nobody's
right?
as good as that at North, but Carlton are a close second. So.
And the interesting thing is, of course, last night we saw the return of the Sack Malthouse brigade. There were quite a few hanging about. They were already keen to see him off, hadn't completed their goal of finals.
Yeah, you sort of asked that question, how long is long enough before a team clicks? We saw last year when Ross Lyon went to Fremantle. That was, 12 rounds before they sort of started to adjust themselves to that mindset of moving back and making sure that they stay in their structures and then preparing to sprint down the ground once they win the ball. Malthouse has sort of said to and played a lot of Carlton players in defensive and tagging roles, something that wasn't as prolific when Ratton was in charge. And it's the evolution, and you're starting to see it. Has Carlton killed their own attack too much? Have they sacrificed too much attack for defence?
Well,
or would you say that is also because they had a lot of players out, but even with those missing players, they're still a better side than that?
Like, if you go through their list of players last night, like, you've got it up here, like, Daigen, primarily a defensive player. Joseph is primarily a defensive player. Tui is defensive, but, they give it to him every time they have to kick past 50 because he's the only one in the team that can do it. Curnow is a defensive player. McInnes is a defensive player. Armfield is primarily a defensive player. Tom Bell, primarily a defensive player, in my eyes at least. Sorry if I'm getting this wrong, Carlton fans. There's a lot of very defensively minded players on the list. Menzel is very attacking minded, but he's probably one of the only ones on the list.
Yeah, I think we noted this a couple of weeks ago that, you look past Judd, you look past Murphy, you look past McLean, who, was injured last night, and Judd, who was, of course, out. And behind them is, players like Carazzo and Keisha, who was out, but there's Curnow, there's Bell, they aren't strong offensive players because, there's players like Simpson, he played a fantastic game last night in defence. He was, probably best on ground. Gibbs, I don't know what's up with him. Andrew Walker, I think, probably should be a bit further up the ground just so they can have a bit more run. And Murphy, I think, he isn't the player he was a year or 2 years ago. I was looking at him last night. He was trying to kick it inside 50. He didn't look like he could kick it 50 metres. I don't know what's wrong with that. He's 25 years old. He should be able to roost 50 metres with ease. So it's interesting to look at. I think they are a very defensive side, and it's obviously what Malthouse is trying to drill into them, but I'm not sure if it's working short term.
And one player I thought told the story out of all of it was Chris Yowen. I thought he actually put in quite a bit of effort in comparison.
It was his best game for a while.
It was. He kicked 2 goals, 3, and it was funny because, in the past he's been quite lazy, and it was quite the opposite, and he was really the only trier among, a handful of players.
What did you guys make of, and we'll talk about the whole investigation later, that's for later, but what did you make of James Hurd's press conference, of those of you that saw it? What's because it was just one of those strange nights in football where it was sort of, we're just not sure what's going to happen next, and it was sort of just thrown open to the people in the room.
Well, it was strange. James Hurd was, for once, embracing the media. He had a press conference that went for how long? 15, 20 minutes. He fielded every single question. Justin Rodsky, the media manager down at Essendon, was saying, James, we got to not answer these questions. We got to cut these short. And James Hurd was like, no, I want to answer these questions. I just want to talk. And it was a good sign to see it. I think he was trying to get a little bit of sympathy from his viewers. I think it was a little bit of a play in that way, but it was nice to see him open for once.
You can interpret it one of two ways. You can interpret it as he knows he's gone and he's got nothing to hide anymore, or he's thinking he can beat it and he's decided to be as transparent as possible.
It was almost like a last rites vibe.
Yeah, it sort of overshadowed the whole night in a way. And
yet again, James makes it about himself.
I don't think last night was his fault, personally. The rest of the season you can make an argument, but not last night. I think the players definitely made a statement that regardless of the sort of things that have transpired at Essendon over the last 18 months, that maybe that there's a breach of trust. It seems as if the players, and they showed a human thing, forgiveness, in the way that they played for him and the way that they still continue to stand by him. They may not be there for long term, they may not be there at the club forever, and we don't know what happens next, but there was definitely a sort of moment where they said, look, we sort of forgive you and we'll stand by you, whatever may happen next.
Don't use those words.
Well, look, it's true for the players, and obviously we don't want to get into the semantics with what's going on with the supporters, but I think it's okay for the players to do that, and there's, forgiveness is a human thing. I think we'll move on to the next game. Down at Cardinia Park, good to see Geelong. Very, very good defensive effort there. They kept the Swans really well, and they won a lot of their own ball, and Matthew Stokes, he's incredibly impressive as he ages, isn't he?
Well, the way he's developed from like fine wine, the way he's developed from that small forward who you rely on to kick 30 goals a year and apply forward pressure, now to convert himself into a midfielder, and a very good midfielder at that. He had 35 disposals yesterday.
37.
37. Okay, even better. So the he's developed a contested side to his game, and I think that's very important in a Geelong side that I think it kind of fell away a little bit under Joel Selwood. I know James Kelly was there, and Bartel would be moved to half back, and it kind of did drop away after Joel Selwood a little bit. But now there's Stokes there, there's Johnson there, and there's a lot of young players as well that get their opportunity on the ball. It's very good for Geelong to see these players that are making their names as midfielders.
Stevie Johnson, just another 26 and 4 goals. Lazy.
Yeah,
I mean, you
lazy.
see the names up the top of the stat sheet. No, stats don't indicate everything, but it indicates how hard a player works to get to every contest and every touch. Touches don't come cheap at AFL football. It's a hard. You got to work for them. You got to work to every contest. You got to keep running, and the players Stokes, Enright, Kelly, Johnson, Mackie, Bartel was up in the top half. This is going to be the basis of their premiership tilt. And it's not just, obviously, you got great young players in Motlop and Christensen who played really well yesterday, especially Motlop in the forward line. But these players just keep going and going and going. And just when you think they're going to reach a year where they fall off the cliff, they're still going. And it reminds me of, I know West Coast, and the only analogy I use is probably Cox and Kerr. They're still sort of in the team, and yes, it looks as if those two are falling off, but these Geelong players are entering their early 30s now. Some of them are pushing 31, 32, 33 next year. Even Chapman came on.
Yeah, 9 disposals in about 15 minutes, as if he'd never missed a game this season. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, they just keep going, and that's going to be the basis for this September, and as you know, experience counts a lot in finals. And I felt as if this Geelong team, when are they going to start losing? Because it doesn't seem like soon.
Well, to win like that, to win by that much, how much was it in the end?
44.
44 points, and have Tom Hawkins contribute a grand total of 3 points.
They kept
He's obviously injured, but it speaks volumes for the amount of spread and goals they get from the midfielders. Like Motlop kicked 3. Obviously Johnson is always going to chip in with a couple, but it speaks volumes to the amount of players they have that can contribute, not just to be, like Richmond, solely focused on one key forward, Rewalt and Hawkins.
Yeah, I think even, you say, the margin really didn't even indicate. They kept Sydney at arm's length. It wasn't exactly a high... Well, the ball was moved up and down the ground a lot, but both defences were good enough to not concede. I mean, Sydney conceded 92 points, but when you think about conceding big totals, Geelong went inside 50, 62 times against the Swans, who are a very good zoning team.
It's the most they've conceded all year. It's the most disposals they've conceded all year, most uncontested possessions they've conceded all year. So, I mean, considering that, it really could have been 10 goals plus.
How much do you think
easily
losing Reece Shaw in the first couple of minutes contributes to a team having to restructure their zone and then consequently give up 62 in a game?
Well, I think Reece Shaw is a kind of flexible player. He's played a bit of forward, he's played a bit down back. So I think, in terms of that, he's not a structurally important player. It's not someone like Ted Richards going down who was quite good yesterday. I think, he's replaceable. Although with Sydney's injuries at the moment, players like Alex Johnson and Roberts Thompson missing down back, you don't want to see more players go down. So,
and it is a suspected ACL tear for Reece Shaw,
which I think it's reported to have the last surgery on, so he should be back for round 1 next year.
Yeah, well,
best possible result.
It is, and it's good to hear now. There's technology that doesn't put players out for an extended period, and there's a better recovery rate, especially with the last surgery. I felt as if yesterday the Geelong forwards pressured really well, and players like Rampy and Ryan O'Keefe that would sometimes push back a little to the back half of the square and just play around with the ball and rebound, as the Swans do really well. They didn't get that opportunity. There was no space. Geelong shut them down, and it's something that Geelong has worked on ever since that Fremantle game. Up until that game down at Cardinia Park about a month ago, there was questions around whether Geelong had the defensive side to impact on the season, and in the last 4 weeks they've been fantastic.
Well, Sydney are one of the best sides rebounding out of defensive 50. I know Reece Shaw missing, that obviously played a part, but, players like Molcheski and Smith and, Jared McVeigh, who was good yesterday, but they just didn't have the same impact. Players like Motlop and Christensen and, Stokes to an extent, the players that really did pressure them, they put a lot of emphasis on making sure that players like McVeigh didn't have as much space as they could, and, Sydney just didn't look the same team when they did.
No, not at all.
Before we move on, just with Geelong's ruck situation, they had 24 hit-outs yesterday. Mumford had 33 by himself. How do you fix Geelong's rucks?
Well, you get Dawson Simpson fit as quickly as possible. I think it's unfortunate that he's gone down because Geelong were a much better team when he was in. So, I mean, they're playing their second and third rucks. They're playing Blitzovs. They're playing Vardy at the moment. So, it's not their best ruck stocks. I think they probably should get Trent Weston there just to make sure they're a little bit competitive. But it's a difficult situation for them at the moment.
It's difficult, but I think the way Geelong's midfield plays, they're willing to concede a centre bounce. It seems strange to say, but they're willing to almost concede the ball just to...
If you can get beaten that badly in hit-outs and then still win the game by 8 goals, then you're doing something right.
Well, they've been a useless clearance side all year, and we know how much that means. So.
Clearances, they mean nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, hear that, Tom Liberatore? Your stats mean nothing.
Ben Cunnington as well.
Yeah. Suckers.
I think we should move on to Friday night. This game wasn't exactly the most...
We just skip it. We tell everyone Collingwood who won. I don't even remember.
Collingwood.
Collingwood won.
It was 62.
It was decided about 15 minutes into the first quarter.
It was a great game until the last quarter.
All right, Collingwood's quarter.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of West Coast and what to make of the Worsfold situation. We spoke about it last week, and it's one that perplexes. It seems as if rather than poor form of players and players not playing well, the reoccurring theme since I reckon that loss to Port Adelaide has been, Worsfold, does he care or not? Because he sits there in the coach's box.
He doesn't look like he
And
cares.
look, he's never been an animated person. He's never been someone like a Brad Scott or a Buckley where he threatens to strangle the person next to them when something doesn't go their way, but he just doesn't look interested in any way, shape or form.
It might be part of his personality, I suppose. I mean, he's a cool personality in a way. He doesn't lose his head. He doesn't threaten to kill people in coaches' boxes. So, I mean, that's one of his attributes in a way. So.
And they were missing Nick Natanui, who I know is only one player, but he's the player that always tears Collingwood to shreds.
He's an impact player, and I think Collingwood in the ruck, when they've had in previous meetings someone like a Darren Jolly, who obviously has lost his pace over his career, and obviously when he's gone up against a Nick Nat, he's just been beaten to, Nick Nat obviously has more endurance and has beaten Jolly to more contacts.
Let's not downplay the significance of Brody Grundy, though.
Yeah.
He's a sensational footballer for what we've seen only, 4 games now?
What is he in
he's only 19.
What game is he in? He's fourth?
Fifth now.
Fifth.
He's played 5, and he only had 5 less hit-outs than
Danger,
Cox,
yeah.
which is not bad considering,
it's bloody good for an 19-year-old in his 5th game.
Very good with the ball as well.
Yeah.
And that mark he plucked overhead in the goal square in the second quarter. I mean, he took that as easily as you like. He's got that attribute to play forward as well. So we'll probably see that more. If they play Wits or someone like that.
And the advantage with Grundy is he'll tap the ball down and he'll immediately go for the player. If he doesn't get it to a Collingwood player, he'll tackle the opposition player that's got it.
He's very good with second and third efforts. You see that a lot from Shane Mumford's probably the best at it, and then Matthew Lovey as well. They're very good tackling players. So
another name. Sorry, Ethan. The other name I want to throw out, Josh Thomas. I think he's in the Herald Sun. No, in the Age, he's top of the list for disposals. It's weird to see a name that's not Pendlebury or Swan up there, but he's what Pete had pretty significant ankle injuries and hasn't had a chance to play.
Yeah, this is his first season. He's had injuries for a few years, and there are obviously some calls to question whether he was ever going to sort of get back on the park like a Sean Rusling or someone, but he's come back and they've shown heaps of faith in him, and that's
35 touches, 8 marks, 3 tackles and 1 goal, 2.
And he's an inside midfielder too, so that's pretty good.
I think
wins clearances too.
That's the way Collingwood's going. I mean, there's a lot of players, obviously. You got the old brigade, sort of your Didaks, your Ben Johnsons, they're moving on, but you see players like Seedsman, Marley Williams, and obviously Thomas there. And obviously Jamie Allett as well. There's a lot of very good young players at Collingwood, and that's something I think Pies fans should be able to hang their hats on. And I think if Collingwood can manage it right, then maybe in next year or the year after they can have a sort of Geelong
resurgence.
Yeah, resurgence, a setup in which you've obviously got players at one end of the scale that are experienced and can contribute, but at the other end you've got players that are young and they can impact games even if they've only played 50 of them.
There's the one difference I noticed between Collingwood and West Coast on Friday night was, we often talk about, a team's bottom 6, obviously the higher quality that is, the more depth the team has, and, the better they often are. St Kilda they played 3 grand finals and lost all of them. They're playing players like Robert Eddy, Andrew McWalter, who obviously, they probably wouldn't have made other grand final sides at the time. So, I mean, you look at players for Collingwood, those players are, there's Didak, Seedsman was a late inclusion. Players like Sam Dwyer, Ben Kennedy, Brent McCaffer. They're quality players who you can rely on for 15 plus disposals a game, and they will continually impact games. And you look at West Coast, it's players like Ash Smith, McGinnity, Jamie Cripps, who he was okay, but I think it's partly their injuries that they've had. I mean, there was no Kerr, there was no Shuey, Gaff was out of it. There was no.
He struggles with a tag, Gaff. He's very suspect under tag.
He's very suspect with tag, and there's no Shannon Hearn and Bo Waters as well. They're both gone. So, when these players get exposed, once they're in the 17 to 22 bracket, West Coast are a much poorer team. It's pretty much 14 versus 18 out there.
And one thing to note, just on the last kind of thing, is Alan Didak had about 12 disposals, roughly. 15 disposals, yeah, which was more than 12 West Coast players, or equal to.
Yeah.
So that kind of says something when he's only played, a quarter and a half, just over about 2 quarters.
Yeah, I think there was 6 players who had under 10 uncontested disposals for Collingwood, and about twice that for West Coast. So there was no space, no effort from them.
Nice to see Didak kick a goal as well. Everyone got around him.
That was a great moment.
Still not as good as Nathan Grimer.
Yeah. And I think on that note, we'll discuss the rest of the games of the weekend. Text us in with your thoughts on 0427 767 767. We'll be back right after these SYN messages.
When I say orchestra, you think of this. However, orchestras can also mean this. Young people of Australia, take everything you know about classical music and shove it up your Rachmaninoff. Listen to The Baton on SYN Radio, 7 a.m. Sunday mornings, to have everything you thought you knew about orchestral music conducted to smithereens.
A side quest is an optional section of a video game and is commonly found in role-playing games.
It is a smaller mission within a larger storyline and can be used as a means to provide non-linear structures to an otherwise linear plot.
As a general rule, the completion of side quests are not essential for the game to be finished, but can bring various benefits to the player characters.
Also non-essential but highly awesome is side quests and SYN.
So tune in Fridays at 11 p.m. to hear Side Quest, SYN's home of indie and retro gaming.
Are you a fan of Monday Night Raw? Perhaps you like to watch them fight on Friday nights. Or maybe you're just interested in what's going on at NXT. Well, no matter what, if you're a WWE fan at heart, you're going to want to catch the SmackDown Hotel every Saturday from 9 p.m. only on SYN.
90.7 FM, SYN Radio.
We're back on Banff Glory FM. Text in your thoughts on 0427 767 767 or online at syn.org.au. We're happy to read out your thoughts. Last night, yesterday afternoon, I suppose, it was a very interesting game, very close game between North Melbourne and Hawthorn. You can see you cringing in the corner, and another close loss for North Melbourne.
I don't think it's necessarily cringing. It was a very good game to watch. It was exhausting at times. I was dying for 3/4 time because it was just exhausting to watch. It was played at such a frenetic pace, and North Melbourne, it's a riddle, and obviously Hawthorn, they're a fantastic side. Their senior players, especially Hodge with his intercept marks in the third quarter, Burgoyne, Mitchell, they all lifted after pretty average first halves. Cyril
Rioli
was great.
well, yeah.
Cyril was fantastic yesterday.
He only had 5 disposals in that third quarter, but it was probably the best.
They all mattered.
They were the best 5 disposals in a quarter that you've seen for a very long time, and that's what he needs to bring into finals. He tackled, he harassed, he had many pressure acts, and that's all you can ask for a player in that sort of mould. North Melbourne, I'm going to say, and I'm going to go on a limb, and I'm going to get accused of bias here, but I reckon top 6 next year. It's hard
top 4, come
on. No. I'm
not
going to
be honest.
Top 6, and I'm going to say this on these, and it's depending on this. It depends how not only players act in pressure situations, but it also depends if 2 players like Aaron Black and obviously Aaron Mullett, if two more can stand up like they have next year, that sort of fills and keeps North Melbourne's only to their bottom four, which they've got a problem with in their starting 22, and then that's a dilemma in itself.
You get a player like, I don't know, maybe Levi Greenwood or something, actually establishing himself as a best 22 player.
He's never going to have the opportunity to. That's the problem.
That's the problem, of course. If someone like Majak Dor comes in and plays 20 games and becomes that forward ruck, once Petrie obviously retires, I don't think it's biased at all. I reckon they will be top 6 next year.
It's interesting to note that if Kangaroos booted 3 more goals in all their matches, they would be 1 win ahead of Hawthorn right now.
Yes, a depressing statistic. I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
I don't think it's a depressing. It's a true indicator of North Melbourne. You see, and again, it seems as if I'm preempting something by saying, if you look at the breakout years before the breakout years of Collingwood, Geelong, Hawthorn, it's almost frightening the similarity in the statistics, and I don't want to preempt it and say North Melbourne will be as good as those sides currently are.
You called it a dynasty. It's starting next year.
No, it's not starting now. There's no dynasty.
It's happening.
No, but I'm just saying, it's just the way modern football, and there are indicators, and if players don't fulfil next year and they don't show what they've shown this year, players like Wells, who in the last 8 months is in career best form, who's all of a sudden there's a bit of debate whether you take Wells or Goddard in the draft now, which there wasn't.
I'd be happy with either at the moment.
Exactly.
Both been in fantastic form.
Carlton should have both. How's that feel?
Yes, it burns. It still burns.
I bet it does.
Yeah, you can blame the AFL Commission for that. Oh, well, John Elliott, actually.
Should have taken them to Supreme Court, but no.
Stand by Elliott.
Negotiate it.
It's important to note that North had their two best defenders out, likely all Australian, Scott Thompson and Nathan Grimer, and then, Franklin and Ruffhead went and kicked 9 goals between them, so, there's a bit of cause and effect there.
But there was some very good midfield delivery from Hawthorn.
Yeah.
And this is what's going to make them so dangerous. They've got a lot of targets down there. You can throw in Gunston, you can throw in Bruce, Rioli, Hale. It's a joke how many forwards they've got. It's the best forward line in the league by a mile.
I think Brad Scott summed it up well after the game. It was the first time this defence has really played with each other. I mean, there was one occasion where Luke Delaney got caught out against Buddy Franklin. There was no one calling out saying, Franklin's turning the other way or something like that. There wasn't really that much communication at times between North Melbourne. But it's the first time that backline's played together. It was North Melbourne's 7th and 8th defenders. So it was actually quite a good effort considering that.
If I was North Melbourne, I'd definitely make a play, because there's obviously a fire sale on at Carlton at the end of the season. If I was North, I'd definitely make a play for someone like a Laidler, because I feel as if that Michael Ferrito, again, yada yada clubman, but he's fallen off the cliff. I don't think he'll be there next year, but you need to have someone who's experienced that can obviously come into the side time to time permitting injuries, and I think that's Scott McMahon. Now, if you've got a Laidler there as well, and obviously injuries, and Grimer is definitely a player who's had issues with injury, I think they need to top up defensive depth. I think Cam and Luke Delaney, they're okay at the moment, and they can play in the side when they need it, but at the moment they just haven't played enough games, and you can't say, okay, Grimer's out for 10 weeks, Luke, you have to go play on the best forward every week. I don't think that's
not fair.
No, it's not. Because he's not as good as some people claim he is, and even that's saying something in itself, because he's not very good anyway.
I think if we can just talk about Hawthorn, because I don't think we're giving them enough credit for yesterday. They were very good. I think when Cyril Rioli turns up like he did in the third quarter, and everyone here has obviously said at some stage, has said at some stage, he's not in the top 50 players in the league. He only turns up once every 5 weeks. But when he turns up, there's probably only about maybe 5 players in the league that can turn a game quicker than he can.
I don't think there's 2, honestly.
Well, fair enough.
I mean, who else is there?
Wells can turn a game like he can. Eddie Betts can probably turn a game like Rioli can.
I'd probably put Wells on par. I wouldn't put Betts ahead of him.
I think when Betts is going, he can. When he's really going,
I think the 3 or 4 games that Chris Yaron has really starred in, he's got that ability, but obviously it just hasn't happened enough for Carlton. But definitely, I think when Yaron is at his absolute best, he can only have 13 or 15 touches. Actually, it reminds me of
that game against West Coast he had, where he had about 20 running bounces. It seemed like, and he only had 12 disposals and 4 goals, but he was the best player on the ground comfortably.
I think if we're going to use the mark for only having touches and really impacting a game, we're going to go Cracker of 2011 at Collingwood. He'd have 9 touches and he'd kick 3 goals and have 4 score assists and something insane like that. Yes, Ballantyne, even Michael Walters.
I'd say Mark of the Year too, 2000.
Yeah.
Christ.
We're going to go back to that well, are we? Let's not go back there.
In any case, I think, like we've obviously established, there's few players in the league that can do what Cyril does, and, if you put him up there with, Franklin and Roughhead, then that 3 is just incredibly dangerous, and we saw it yesterday.
He's one of their 3 most important players.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on Todd
doing
Goldstein.
a third of the work.
Todd Goldstein, he's in All-Australian form, of course, but yesterday lost the hitouts to Hale and Bailey. Do you think it's an area that North will... I mean, they did recruit Curry, but he was injured. I think is he fit now? Is he up for the season?
He's played in the VFL,
but
smashing the VFL.
He's playing well, but obviously not as well as he was previously pre-injury during the season. But he'll rectify that once he gets game time and has the off-season off.
Do you think that's something that Scott would want to change come next season?
Yeah.
To give... Because Goldstein's been rucking pretty much by himself all season.
Problem with Goldstein is he loves rucking by himself, and that he's very... I think it's he's stubborn about rucking by himself.
Yeah, there was a period at the start of last season when North played average and Goldstein played average because McIntosh was in the team. And there's only really, in my opinion, 2 ways he can do this. Either he keeps Goldstein in the team and Petrie plays that role further up in which Black and Tarrant play forward and Petrie sort of plays that Stevie J half forward, but he goes around.
For you comparing Petrie to Stevie J.
No, not Stevie J. The area that Stevie J covers on the ground.
They're completely different heights. It's a bullshit comparison.
Yeah, I know I'm going to get that. But anyway, just that sort of area that he plays in the ground, so he can obviously ruck around the ground and boundary throw-ins and move around and allow Goldstein to either go back defensively or move forward. Or you play Goldstein and Dorr in the same team. But I don't think North have enough running players just yet to sort of do that. So it's something they're going to have to work on. Obviously, Dorr needs more fitness.
Well, for the time being, Goldstein's one of the best 2 rucks in the competition, so I think...
Ooh.
Along with Brody Grundy, of course.
No, he's 3rd.
Who's the other one? I'm interested.
Minson.
Oh, okay.
Minson. I'd say Mumford. Or no, Pike, actually. Pike.
No, I'd have
Pike is overrated.
No, I think he's rated.
I think he's overrated.
No, in terms of rocking ability,
Bring it.
up there, but forward, he's a very good forward. So I think we'll move on to the other game last night, Freo versus Port Adelaide.
Shellacking.
Very quietly over. Another game over, 20 minutes in?
Not even. It was over about 10 minutes in, 5 minutes in. Keeping Port Adelaide, who are a top 8 side now, keeping them to 9 at half time it's unheard of.
Not 9 goals, 9 in total. 9.
One goal, 3. It's unheard of, really. I mean, the disparity between, I think, the top 4 and the rest of the finals, the rest of the final sides is something that we haven't really seen in previous years. I think it's bigger than it has ever been.
Yeah, it's the top 5-6 teams are really good, but then after that it's dismal. Really, just sort of ordinary quality.
Just quietly, I'm going to read a stat line out for you. I want you to guess who it is. 8 kicks, 6 handballs, 1 mark, 43 hitouts, 15 tackles, and a point.
Matthew Lobby.
Well done. That is an incredible effort in a losing side.
He's
15 tackles.
He's one of those players, and something clicked in that off season at Port Adelaide. Obviously, there was a bit of camaraderie with, obviously, the incident with J-Mac and the new coach and the new culture that they're trying to establish there. And he's one of those players that was there, similar to probably a Westhoff, where it looked as if they weren't going to sort of, not make it, but they weren't going to achieve potential that they had. And he's one of those players that's made that jump and made that Port team.
For Ruckman.
And they've made that Port team something that I think is special long term and definitely into a final side now, which they are.
Well, it was always an interesting thing to look at with Port Adelaide. They had 3 rucks at the start of the year. They rotated in and out of the side. They had Lobie, they had Jared Redden, they had Brent Renoff, who, he's probably on the way out now. And,
Understood.
there were 3 players who would constantly not establish themselves in the side. They would have, 15, 20 hit-outs each. They have maybe 5, 10 disposals, but they wouldn't do anything special. And, Port Adelaide probably lose the hit-outs every week. And now Matthew Loby's made that step up, and Port Adelaide are actually a very competitive side in the clearances. When, not Matthew Loby. When Travis Boak's got the service of Matthew Loby, actually tapping it down straight to him makes him a much better player. Now Travis Boak can actually rely on a ruckman to actually tap it straight down his throat more often than not.
Yeah.
Probably was smashed by Crowley yesterday, though.
No, he got smashed.
He got
by
towelled.
Crowley, so everyone gets smashed by Crowley.
Yeah, and Port's...
Or pinched.
Yeah. One of the more amusing incidents of the year. But Port's midfield, something that they've based their very good season on, well, by obviously their standards and their development rates, very good season. Their midfield just had a spanner, like Fremantle, what they usually do. They just crushed teams and kept the ball close, and they made players work for every disposal and mark.
It's a slow death.
It is.
It's a horrifying thing to watch. It really is. It's like watching a boa constrictor. It's really, it's awful.
But it's effective, and what's going to happen is Fremantle...
Killing machine.
I think, look, they're not going to finish second unless something happens to Geelong next week.
Unless there's something catastrophic down at Simmons here.
Yeah. Look, if they made second and they had the home final and they won, I'd say their premiership hopes would be probably 30-35%. I reckon, because they didn't get that home final. It's probably down to about 20 now. They need to get themselves right. They've got a few players who've got out. They bring a McFarlane back, Clancy Pearce, obviously Ballantyne back into that side. And yeah, if they can take that on the road, and they're going to play in Melbourne, probably against Geelong. They did it last year. Obviously, they tried to back it up at Simmons about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Didn't work.
No one does that.
Yeah, well, on the MCG, do you reckon that they can beat Geelong on the MCG? Because that's what it's looking like is going to happen.
Yeah, they can. They can very easily, I reckon. Now they got Pavlich back as well, who's so important to their structure.
4 goals yesterday.
He kicked 4 goals yesterday. Freo are about 6 goals better off when he's actually in the side. So, they've got him back. He kicked 6 goals in that elimination final last year as well against Geelong, of course. So, now that Freo are actually starting to get these players back, and McFarlane will come back, Pearce will come back, they will threaten in that likely qualifying final. Moving on to Adelaide-Melbourne yesterday, the last game Adelaide will play at AAMU Stadium, and they didn't really send it off in style, but they got the result. They got the 10-goal win. So
such a strange year for the Crows.
And it's really funny to say they didn't really play that well, didn't get the result, and they still won by 10 goals. So.
It was a reflection on Melbourne.
Yeah, it was and I only watched bits and pieces because I was flicking in between games, and it turned in the second quarter, and once it turned, it just stayed that way, and it was similar to most games, Melbourne games this year.
They just have no way to stop the tide. Once the damn wall breaks, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And there's no second. I mean, the only player that I saw that tried to break the lines yesterday, and he got caught a couple of times, that was Grimes, and he looked very comfortable on half-back. And if I was whoever's going to coach Melbourne next year, I might settle him there and consider rotating through the midfields as a secondary option rather than just throwing him in there and saying, just go get it. I'd keep him on half-back, and because that's what Melbourne needs. No one breaks lines. It's a very stationary stop-start.
It's a team completely devoid of confidence, that's why.
Yeah.
They have no confidence in themselves.
There's no taking the game on. Yep. And that's something that they've got to install. They've got players like Blees, Howe, that are very exciting, but they're stationary in the forward line and not stationary further up the ground because they've got no one to play in the forward line at the moment because of all injuries, and obviously Hogan's can't play yet, which is a stupid rule in my opinion, but because he's a freak in the VFL.
So you would abolish the rule that states you have to be over 18 to play in the AFL.
I wouldn't abolish the rule. I'd set up probably an independent sort of thing where you can appeal and say, look, he's obviously good enough. He's got a body enough. He can play. He's got the size to play AFL, and I'd try and at least let teams make a case for it, but not under 17. You have to be 17. And because we did that, I mean, we had players, 16-year-olds.
Youngest player in AFL history was 15 years.
And that was what?
1950s.
1950s, but even then we had 16-year-olds up until 1995.
Even someone like Tim Watson.
Yeah, Tim Watson
made his
came.
debut at 15.
And look, and I wouldn't say that young because that's just too young. Mark McGough, didn't he start as a 17-year-old?
Yeah, he was 17 when he started. Yeah,
Yeah.
He won an Anzac
He
Day
won an
medal.
Anzac Day medal.
Yeah, exactly.
Second game,
I think teams should be able to appeal if they're 17 years old. I think there should be the board set up and say, look, this is what we want to do. And there's not many in the system like that do get thing. It's only because of obviously father son and obviously mini draft, and even that those aren't set up as permanent things.
There's probably 5 I can think of: Swallow, O'Meara, McDonald, Martin, and Hogan. That you can have a legitimate case to play as a 17-year-old.
Yeah, and look, that's what I think. Teams should be able to go to the AFL and say, look, here's our case. Can you just at least hear it?
Yeah. Even then, if you put Hogan in Melbourne's forward line, I don't reckon it'd do much.
You have a midfield to kick it there.
Yeah, you need a midfield, and
you could put Swallow, O'Meara, McDonald, and who was the other one, Martin, in the midfield, and have them kicking it to Hogan, and they still wouldn't win games.
Back on Sam Bliss. I mean, he's injured at the moment, but I think one of the first things that the new Melbourne coach has to do is put him back on halfback. I remember he had his first 3 or 4 games he actually played there, and he had one game last year against Sydney in the midfield where he had 20 disposals and he ran. He had running bounces, and Melbourne actually looked to have penetration off halfback, and they haven't looked like that at all this year entirely from any player. So
None.
I think he's got the pace. I mean, he hasn't really lost much from his broken legs, so hopefully the Melbourne coach can do that. But I think we'll go to some...
Just before we move on, we didn't talk at all about Adelaide. Their young players are really starting to step up. Mitchell Grigg had 21 touches and kicked a goal yesterday. Brad Crouch had 31 touches and 5 tackles. Lewis Johnson kicked 6 goals. So,
Laird and Kerridge weren't bad either.
They're not completely devoid of hope, and they could still technically mathematically make finals. So, yeah.
It's a strange season, and the Crows have had a strange season, a kick from a grand final. I think with their draw last year, they weren't a top 2 side, but they were definitely a top 4, top 5 side.
And they're definitely not as bad as their ladder position this year would show.
No, I'd say no. But obviously they don't have access to obviously picks this year.
No.
So obviously they've got a. You're very vindictive.
I'm a bad person. I revel in the schadenfreude of others.
Yeah, I think obviously they've got to make some
wrong.
Yeah, it is. But they've got to make some list management decisions, and they've got to obviously try and get players into the team, and maybe even target some other other players. Who's that one that's been in the 2s all year and he's been fantastic, and he just hasn't got a game? Is it not Wright? Is it Matthew Wright?
It was Wright, yeah. At the start of the year, he wouldn't get a game at all, and he was one of their, the depth important players.
And he was
that 3rd or 4th string midfielder who would win clearances and kick goals. So, he hasn't done that at all this year. He's been either in the reserves or the sub. So,
and that's been those players have been Adelaide's barometer, and they're obviously missing. They're missing Tippett. Yeah, and you can't. People say, but they're missing Tippett, and obviously that structure needs work. But I think on that note, we should go to some SIN messages, and when we come back, we'll speak about the ASADA investigation.
This is SIN Radio. With the 24-hour news cycle, politics can at times be a little hard to keep up with.
Prime Minister Kevin Rudd will today detail billions of dollars in
When Ed
savings.
Husic was sworn in as Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister and for broadband on Monday,
As you would probably be aware by now, Kevin Rudd has been elected as leader
Kevin
of the
Rudd
Federal
might be able to
Parliamentary
secure a
Labor
win.
Party.
Throughout Season 3, Brodie Carmody and myself, Matilda Morazzi, will be here with future politicians, bringing you all the political developments and policies which are going to be important to your future. Tune in every Saturday afternoon from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Future Politicians, tomorrow's Politicians today on SIN.
Gaming's come a long way in 30 years.
Pong to Mario, the Crash Bandicoot, Halo, and all the way to Skyrim. Video games have quickly gone from something for kids to a pivotal part of human society.
So much so that on Fridays, SIN has 2 shows dedicated to it.
Radio Respawn is on Fridays from 3. 1 hour of gaming news, reviews, and events for all the biggest series you've come to know and love.
From 11 side quests, you'll source of both retro and indie games, delving into the weird, wonderful, and generally unheard of side of gaming.
You're not going to get that anywhere else.
Because Friday is game day on SIN Radio.
And welcome back to Bound for Glory on SIN, the only football show on SIN 90.7 FM. we're going to talk about the ASADA investigation with the Bombers and their performance-enhancing drugs. Obviously, it's completely dominating football at the moment. It's reducing the season to pretty much a backwards or sideshow because this is all anyone can talk about. Obviously, it hit a high point for Essendon supporters last night when they managed to beat Carlton. I think that was a really significant win for, morale in the supporters group and all that stuff. So, I mean, where do we go from here? Tomorrow looks like it's D-Day, and Hurd looks like he's going to have to face the music tomorrow of all days. What have we got?
Well,
what are we looking at?
You've read that charge sheet that obviously the AFL made public, and I think it was obviously the full charge sheet, not the edited one, discussed with Essendon. And they released that. There was the one dated the 13th of August. There was one that was dated the 16th, which the AFL had agreed to release, but they released the 13th one instead with obviously not only charges, but significant evidence, text messages, emails. Obviously there was a redacted list of substances and tables on that list, and a few substances which they did black out.
You probably assume that was a list of players and substances.
We can only assume.
I'd say a very rough list because obviously...
Logically,
yes. Yes, that was probably players, and it was probably medical information, and obviously that couldn't be made public.
I was just going to say, why did you just kind of answered it? Why did Hurd want that to be withheld?
You mean the side effects?
It's private.
Embarrassing.
It's not only
sexually.
It's not only embarrassing, but it's medical information.
It's private medical information. You can't really reveal these things publicly.
But they did black out the side effects, though, didn't they?
Melanotan, which you can get on Google and type in side effects of melanotan. It'll give you a tan and a painful, prolonged erection. It's exactly what comes up when you
walking around the coach's box
with a fat. I mean, come on, like.
Well, it wasn't just that, and looking into the charges,
and a cat couldn't scratch it.
And looking into the charges, there
it's 10:40 in the morning.
Keep going, there's more.
I know,
mate. That's late for me. Like normally I've ruined the show by now, but you got to give me time to build up.
Yeah, and it was obviously the Ziggy report, which is very damning in itself. There was experiments, not only coaches using obviously not only the vanity drugs, but drugs such as adrenaline shots, and it boggles the mind how. I mean, it doesn't make it. How do you do that?
The charge sheet, and it's like, Dank's just like injecting people in his office. Allegedly injecting people in his office. It paints the picture of her just walking in, rolling up his sleeve, and going, just right here, Dank. Yep, come on, right here. Lady.
And look, I don't think that was far from the truth to what went on.
That's sickening. It's like not only is it an what's the word? Not a sterile environment. It's also
which was in the charge sheet.
Just like wrong.
And obviously there's invoices for banned drugs.
Unlock the fridge. Like, what if a child walks in there and just decides to, candy? Just open the fridge. Candy. Let's eat this. No.
Inject this.
Yeah, I suppose you can inject it into your gums, but please keep going. Just stop me talking.
And it was very damning. It was very confronting, and obviously it's a reoccurring thing that commentators say. It's sad for football, and obviously without going into the whole, poor James Hurd, because James Hurd is very complicit in this.
Mm-hmm.
Without going into that, it is sad. Like, to see us get to this point where we've got a team which has played very well this season, and they're not going to be rewarded with finals, and I understand that they can't play for certain reasons, and I don't think they should play for certain reasons. But it's sad that even we've got a fantastic final series on offer, and believe it or not, I agreed with what Brian Taylor said last night. This is just ridiculous. Why would... And this is one of the main things why I'm still frustrated with James Hurd and Essendon. Why would you do this in the first place? Why?
I mean, we often ridicule, the way older players, talk about footy. We say they don't, have the same understanding of modern footy as, current players do. But Brian Taylor, he was correct. He was quite angry. I remember him saying on 3AW on Friday night he was pissed off. That's normally not something you would hear from a professional radio commentator, but, it totally fits the situation. The way he was angry at the way the players have been treated. I think it's really interesting to get that perspective, and I think it's true as well.
And I think looking at the form of all the sort of AFL sides at the moment, Essendon are definitely in the top 8 without a doubt. Like I know the last couple of weeks for Essendon haven't been great, but if you look over the season,
I think.
Yeah, but if you look over the season, if the ones who are below, I guess North have shown quite a few things. Obviously, as we've said, Carlton right now don't look like they're better than Essendon. Well, they're not from last night, obviously, but it's you're going to have an 8th place team that just jumps in when really they shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and to say, obviously, as Jordan asked, what happens next? There's going to be an AFL Commission hearing on Monday, we believe. We don't obviously there are negotiations between two parties after the AFL fired the shots with the charges and a statement on AOD, which has been the focus of debate with ASADA and the AFL, and obviously with WADA as well, saying it is a banned substance. I reckon if players are to receive, and I do think players will receive infraction notices, but I think ASADA need to make a case. And obviously people need to look at this, and this is something that I'm trying to look at it from the angle of an ASADA investigator. You have evidence of invoices, but just imagine you're a ASADA investigator. Evidence of invoices of banned drugs. Someone who has, obviously, and looking at the evidence and looking at, obviously, what AFL investigators and what ASADA investigators have established, with Charter talking to them as well, what dank has brought into the country, where they sit, are they banned, not banned, are they in dispute? You have to go and you have to look into this further. You can't just turn around and say, look, Essendon, you've got your can't play finals, you're off. No, you need to look into it. And I really hope it doesn't get to players being suspended, but I think infraction notices will come. Whether players will be serving those suspensions, I really don't know, and I really can't say, because I think Essendon do have a case for AOD. It's banned, but considering confusion and obviously legal semantics, I think that they can get off that.
There's drugs like thymus and Betafort.
No, you can't get off that. That's 2 years. That's 2 years banned. That's not even negotiable to 6 months, even if you try and obviously cooperate with the investigators. That's two years.
And we know from previous history that ASADA's not soft on this either. Seeing players like Wade Lees, for example, copping 2 years for a substance that was never delivered to him and something that he never took. So they're not soft.
And if we believe, sorry Ben, if we believe the official on the record interview that Nick McKenzie did with Stephen Dank in April, where there's that line they say where McKenzie asks Dank about the frequencies of thymus and Betafort, whatever it is, and Dank explains, but asks that it's not to be published, then there is legitimate proof that they took the substance.
There's circumstantial evidence, and I think to explain why players haven't got infraction notices yet is because what happens is ASADA finish their investigation, because you've got to remember this is an interim report at the moment. ASADA will finish their investigation, they'll have a full report, and then they'll hand it over to an independent government panel, and they'll assess the evidence that ASADA investigators collect. They'll look at their case, and then what they'll do is they'll obviously write down players that they believe should be on the recommended list of who should get infraction notices. They'll hand this evidence back to ASADA. ASADA will look at it. They'll put their recommendations on the list, and then they'll hand that to the AFL, who obviously are the ones who end up handing out infraction notices. And the AFL will obviously either say, okay, you've breached this and this is your, this is ASADA, what they've recommended, and they can choose whether that they can take on board ASADA's recommendations for penalties. If WADA don't feel, that, and WADA's looking at this closely because looking at this for two reasons. One reason is obviously because this case is the SO clause, the one where we've never had anyone suspended because of that before, and obviously and there's no such thing as they don't look at previous cases and say, this is the precedent for what went on before. It's not done like that, but there's never been a successful or even a case where players been banned under SO. The second reason is because before the Olympics, next Olympics, WADA's going to sit down and they're going to try and put coaches, enablers, because obviously with AROD in the States, enablers and people that allow athletes to dope, they're going to edit it So trainers and coaches can now be definitely banned. There's a sort of grey area at the moment, but it'll definitely be black and white. So obviously, considering this case and considering the role that Essendon officials played in the sourcing of these banned drugs, they're going to be looking at this closely, and they can appeal to the CAS tribunal if the AFL findings and if the AFL don't take the proper recommendations that they believe that they should have taken from ASADA.
So they're going to establish something to say for the James Hird example, being injected allegedly with hexarelin, that would actually now fall under the WADA code.
That would, under the list of recommendations, and there'll be a giant meeting next year by all signatories, and obviously get their say in it, and obviously there's laws that they've got to go over and stuff and see where it falls under, but that will become black and white next year, where there's no, and obviously it won't be applied retroactively.
No.
But this will probably set a precedent for what the laws are going to become, so it's more black and white. And this and the A-Rod case would be the two big arguments for this, and that's why WADA would be looking at this.
So it sounds as though in compiling the report, it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. Do you think this could run over the off-season, possibly into next season?
I will say this will run in the middle of next year. There's no, and obviously with the Supreme Court case that James Hird, I don't think he will relent it, and there'll be a deal where he drops the case. I think there will be a case. This will go into next season, potentially into the off season of next season. So this there's no resolution.
Far from
now.
over.
This is far from over, and we don't know if Essendon will fight the penalties. We don't know, because there's still no agreement yet. There's negotiations, but Essendon can turn around and say, or the AFL can turn around and say, no, this is ridiculous.
We want to fight this all the way.
Yeah, and it's a sad state, and
hopefully it doesn't come to that.
I really think it will.
Even though it seems to be growing more likely by the day. I think we better move on to the previews now. First game of today is St Kilda Gold Coast. Interesting clash. Gold Coast higher in the ladder and probably in the better form of late, I think you'd have to argue. So, I don't think they play Etihad particularly well. So, St Kilda obviously hold the home ground advantage. I think that'll come into some significance. It's a fast ground. I think that suits St Kilda's game style more. They've probably got better running players. I just think it plays into St Kilda's favour a little bit more.
Yeah.
I will tip. Is it the Gold Coast?
Yeah, Gold Coast.
Sorry, I was not listening to that at all.
You just heard St Kilda and thought
I'll tip whoever's playing against St Kilda. No, I think they're just not very good at the moment. I can't see them beating the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast have improved out of sight. I think they're finishing off the season quite well, so I'm going to tip the Gold Coast.
Yeah, this will be Gold Coast's first win second win in Melbourne, because they obviously beat Melbourne earlier in the year. Yeah, this is their first win at Etihad, I think. Yay! They've got a very good midfield. Their defence is solid. I like the way that they move the ball. They're very exciting to watch, and I think they'll win today.
Yeah, I'm going to go Gold Coast. They beat them in round one this year, of course, by 13 points, and I reckon the trend will continue.
It was only 13 points. I'm still going to tip St Kilda. I think the ground plays into their favour.
Yeah, I think St Kilda will win. They can afford to now. They're a couple of wins behind the Bulldogs, so I think they'll win.
Not a very appealing Sunday of football. GWS Richmond.
Boo, Richmond by how much?
I reckon Richmond are easing towards finals. So I reckon 5-6 goals. I don't think they'll throw full tilt at it this afternoon.
Yeah, they wouldn't want to rest up, not cruise into finals.
Not cruise. They've got a very heavy training load at the moment, so I don't think, even if they end up 10 goals in front at half-time, I don't expect them to go and full-on blow it out. They've just got to get the result thereafter.
Well, you've seen that in, second halves of late. They dropped off against Brisbane, they lost against Carlton, so I think if it is 10 goals at half-time, it'll be 10 goals at full-time as well. Yep. So, I think Richmond by 40 points.
Richmond.
Will Riewoldt play? He twinged his knee, was it? Last week against Carlton, and he had scans it, of course, and it wasn't too major damage. Do you think they will rest him?
I don't know, but if I was Richmond, I'd say to Vickery, look, you've been at the club for a while. Today, we're going to... Obviously, before finals, we need a second target, because I don't think if Richmond go into finals with someone like Jack Riewoldt as their only forward, they're not going to go far. And obviously, you don't say they're going to win the flag, because they're probably, and I don't think they will. But Vickery's got to become that player, and he's got to have days where he starts imposing himself and just taking the game by the scruff of the neck. Maybe today you rest Riewoldt and say, look, Tyrone, today, this is your day. You've got to go out there and kick 5-6 goals.
And get it together, Tyrone.
Yeah.
Come on, Tyrone.
Yeah, the final game of the round, I think we all pick Richmond.
Yeah.
General consensus. The final game of the round, Brisbane and the Bulldogs.
The interesting one, I think.
Semi-interesting, considering neither of these.
Not interesting in terms of a finals type of atmosphere. Even though Brisbane obviously are still mathematically a chance, but in terms of both teams being in good recent form, they've surged up the ladder a little bit of late.
Well, yeah. Considering Brisbane are 19% behind Carlton, I'm guessing they need about a 400-point victory today. So I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, it's still a possibility.
I think the Bulldogs will probably get up today. I think they're just playing too good a football at the moment. Brisbane, last week they weren't really impressive against GWS. I didn't take much out of it. I think they're sort of winding down, even if they're a mathematical chance of making finals. I don't think they'll win today. I think the Bulldogs is playing too good a football just at the moment, and I reckon these are two sides that will probably be fighting out for the bottom end of the 8 next year. So this is just playing players and getting experience into them at the moment. Yeah, Bulldogs.
I'll tip the Dogs as well.
Yep, I've got the Dogs.
Yeah, I think I'll tip the Bulldogs.
I'll go Brisbane just for something different.
Just before we go,
just going against the trend.
Just before we go, unfortunately, the team I play local football for has missed out on the finals, and I'm struggling with a Mad Monday idea.
Obviously, responsibly Mad Monday.
Responsible Mad Monday. There's no alcohol involved or anything like that. The theme, however, is something starting with the letter S. Now, if you're listening to this and you have an idea for a costume starting with S, post it on Twitter at Bound for Glory, and we'll pick it up. And we'll give something to the best. We'll give something to the best one. I'll find something.
Give you our love.
Yeah, we'll give you our love, or I'll take a photo with it and credit you or something like that.
Just with a snake.
Yeah, no, something, I don't know, something starting with S, a superhero or something, I don't know. Anyway, not Spider-Man.
I know something, but I can't say it on air.
Yeah, do it, go on.
No, I can't say it on air.
It's 11 a.m. We got to finish anyway.
Right.
Thank you for listening to Bound for Glory. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Bound for Glory FM, as well as like us on Facebook. And be sure to check out www.boundforglorynews.com for all your footy news, fantasy news.
Terrific.
Most importantly, the under-18s coverage with the draft coming up.
Some good writers on there.
Player profiles. We got the Phantom draft going now, which is just it's wrapping up, and weekly round updates of the TSC Cup. While you're at it, follow Bound for Glory News on Twitter and Facebook. That's about all for this week. Catch us same time next week, 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings on SYN 90.7 FM. We'll be back same time. See ya.
Drops mic.
I'm invincible. I'm paying money. The girl's happy. She's got no money. I got my rocks off. Oh, how good is this?